The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us on Business Brief. U.S. President Donald Trump defends his latest round of steep tariffs. He insists the new policy will eventually have a positive impact on the American economy.
We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? They've taken advantage of us for many, many years.
Trump also said he was open to reducing his tariffs if other nations were able to offer something phenomenal, indicating that the White House was open to negotiations. The remarks come even as financial markets took a dive on his plans. The S&P 500 recorded its biggest one-day loss since 2020. Trump says the market slide was expected. U.S. allies are not happy with the reciprocal tariffs imposed by Trump 2.0. France calls the move brutal and unfounded and a shock for international trade. It now calls on European companies to suspend planned investments in the United States.
The scale and the negative dimension of the tariffs will impact above all the American economy. And one thing is sure after last night, the American economy and Americans, be that businesses or the people, will come out of this weaker and poorer than yesterday.
Canada also readying countermeasures against Trump's tariffs. The Canadian government says it will also impose a 25% tariff on all vehicles imported from the United States.
We will fight to bring each of these tariffs to an end. We're fighting in courts, challenging that these tariffs have been illegally imposed under U.S. law. We have gone to the World Trade Organization because these actions are against international trade law.
The Spanish government, for its part, will implement a 14.1 billion euro plan to cushion the impact of the new U.S. tariffs on the Spanish economy, which includes large-scale domestic aid for the affected sectors, including new financing and loans.
The trade war initiated by President Trump is terrible news for the world. It is also bad news for the United States and, of course, for Europe, and consequently, for Spain as well. We will do this starting today, and we will do it preventively to protect our businesses and workers, to provide certainty amidst so much uncertainty, and also to anticipate the tariff impacts that, unfortunately, are already dominating the horizon. We will do this starting today, and we will do it preventively to protect our businesses and workers, to provide certainty amidst so much uncertainty, and also to anticipate the tariff impacts that, unfortunately, are already dominating the horizon.
Impeached South Korean President Yeol is ousted. That's after the Constitutional Court upheld Parliament's impeachment motion over Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law last year. With Yoon's ouster, a presidential election is required to take place within 60 days. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will continue to serve as acting president until a new leader is inaugurated. Yoon declared martial law on December 3rd to fight what he called anti-state forces. It was lifted just hours later after being rejected by Parliament.
In support of the will of the sovereign people, we will do our best to manage the next presidential election so that the next government can be launched without disruption in accordance with the Constitution and laws. I solemnly acknowledge the grave and unfortunate situation in which a sitting head of state has been impeached for only the second time in our constitutional history.
Well, Asian shares fell to the lowest level in 2 months after a rout wiped out about $2.5 trillion from American equities, as President Donald Trump's once-a-century tariff shock prompted investors to trim risk. Japan stocks led declines in the region on Friday, falling about 3%, while Australia's ASX 200 also joined that sliding into correction territory after declining 11% since its last high in February. South Korea's Kospi slipped 1.5% after the country's constitutional court upheld the impeachment of President Yoon Yeol, ousting him from office. The dollar extended its slide while yields on the 10-year U.S. Treasury dipped below the closely watched 4% level once more on Friday. Oil extended a sharp drop after OPEC Plus unexpectedly increased the supply by 3 times the planned amount in May. Gold was steady after falling from its latest record high. Have to pause for a few reminders. The biggest business stories from around the country and the market's closing data are up next. Keep it here on Business Brief, only on the Bilyonaryo News channel. Welcome back to Business Brief. The country's inflation rate falls to its lowest level in nearly 5 years. Our correspondent Soo-Jin Kim joins us on the line for details. Soo-Jin, go ahead.
Yes, Raine, the country's inflation rate further slowed to 1.8% in March, down from 2.1% in February, marking a continued cooling of prices for basic goods and services. This is the lowest inflation rate recorded since May 2020. During the height of the pandemic, when it stood at 1.6%. The biggest factor behind the decline was the plunge in food prices, with rice even registering an inflation rate of negative 7.7%. Retail prices of rice fell across all variants, now ranging between 46 to 63 pesos a kilo. Congressman Joey Salceda acknowledges the tapering of rice prices, but reinforces that the government should likewise find solutions for the challenges in vegetables, meat, and fish. Meanwhile, corn prices also dropped. However, despite the overall slowdown, certain food items continue to see price increases. These include pork, potatoes, and mangoes, driven by supply issues such as the ongoing impact of African swine fever on meat supply. Fish, especially galunggong, along with eggs and infant formula, also registered faster price increases due to lower production levels relative to demand. National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arteni Balisacan said that despite inflation remaining within the government's target range of 2 to 4%, authorities will continue to monitor possible price shocks, particularly anticipated electricity rate hikes and further increases in fish and meat prices, and will respond with timely and targeted interventions. And those are latest updates from Quezon City. Back to you, Raine.
Thank you so much for that report, Soo-Jin Kim. Bilyonaryo George Yang has renewed his master franchise with American fast food giant McDonald's in the Philippines. Our correspondent Paolo Barcelon joins us on the line for that story. Paolo.
Hi, Raine. Good afternoon. More Filipinos can indulge in McDonald's in the next 2 decades as Golden Arches Development Corporation, which is owned by the Bilyonaryo Yang family, gets a new 20-year license to own and sub-franchise restaurants in the Philippines. McDonald's Philippines President and CEO Kenneth Yang says it aims to open more stores in the Philippines this year and position itself ahead of the competition by focusing on innovation and food quality. Majority of McDonald's Philippines restaurants, Raine, are situated here in Luzon, 70% of which have their own drive-thru facilities. In 2024 alone, 65 new branches of the fast food giant opened in the country, and Yang adds their innovations such as self-ordering kiosks, enhanced digital options through the McDelivery app, and sustainable construction of some of its branches are just some of the company's key investments in 2025. Yang also says the group takes pride in its diverse hiring opportunities as 70% of the restaurant chain's workforce are working students. The group also had earlier entered into agreements with local governments to hire senior citizens, just like in Manila. Raine, Yang adds that the future for the quick service restaurant industry remains bright despite increasing competition from local and international brands in the market. Currently, McDonald's hires 65,000 employees across the country, and they're aiming to reach the 800 store mark this year. Raine?
Thank you so much for that story, Paolo Barcelon. On national development, after pushing to boost the country's tech and manufacturing edge, the government now faces scrutiny over the pace of infrastructure spending, a key driver of growth and jobs. Infrastructure spending fell to 146.7 billion pesos in December. Latest data from the Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, show this is nearly 20% lower than the 183 billion pesos recorded in the same month of 2023. DBM says the decline is due to high base effects from last year, along with ongoing fund processing and completed and continuing projects this year. Despite the drop in December, total spending on infrastructure and other capital outlays still grew by 10% in 2024, reaching 1.33 trillion pesos from 1.20 trillion in 2023. As global uncertainty rattles markets and supply chains, Philippine CEOs remain cautiously optimistic about the year ahead, signaling resilience in the business sector despite headwinds from trade policy and geopolitical risks. According to the latest EY CEO Outlook survey, 62% of Filipino chief executives say they are somewhat optimistic about the local business environment for the next 12 months. Nearly half of the respondents, or 46%, say they have high confidence in the global economic outlook, while 48% remain bullish on their own industry's growth potential. The survey comes amid lingering pressures from global inflation, tighter financial conditions, and fresh uncertainty over trade policy following the U.S.'s new tariff announcements. Ernst & Young CEO Outlook Pulse survey gathered insights from 1,200 chief executives worldwide, including 50 from the Philippines. The Department of Justice has filed a tax evasion case against Bilyonaryo Cosmetics after the Bureau of Internal Revenue found the company using ghost receipts to reduce its tax dues. BAR Commissioner Raine Musñgi said the DOJ has approved the complaint from the agency's Run After Fake Transactions Task Force. 4 criminal cases have been filed in Quezon City courts against Bilyonaryo, including its president, Giselle Dosi, and treasurer Miami Sitauco, for tax evasion and providing false tax information. He added that warrants of arrest for Blackwater team owner, and Sitauco are expected to be issued soon. China claims to have arrested 3 Filipino spies. Beijing says one of the suspects had been found conducting espionage near military facilities. It further claims the individuals had provided a large amount of military-related and confidential video materials to Philippine agents. National Security Council spokesman Jonathan Malaya says the DFA is still looking into the claim. This comes after at least 5 alleged Chinese spies were arrested in the Philippines earlier this year. Beijing claims Manila fabricated the cases, quote, without clear facts.
China firmly opposes this and has made solemn representations on many occasions. China urges the Philippines to stop making groundless accusations, handle individual cases involving Chinese citizens in accordance with the law and fairly, and effectively protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens in the Philippines.
Well, the Foreign Affairs Department urges China to respect the rights of 3 Filipinos arrested in the country for alleged espionage. The DFA asserts protecting the rights and interests of the Filipinos remains the prime priority for the Philippine government. It says the Consulate General is providing all necessary assistance, including legal support. The DFA stresses the allegations should be tried with due process. Earlier this year, at least 5 alleged Chinese spies were arrested here in the Philippines. Beijing claims Manila fabricated the cases. As the stock market continues going down a slippery slope, bonds are the new safe haven. In an interview on Business 360, Dino Aquino, Security Bank's VP and fixed income head, calls 2025 a turning point for Philippine bonds. With inflation at 1.8% this March, he sees room for rate cuts and a stable peso.
6-1 when I entered the trust business, and it's still there, I think. So, and in dollar terms, you might actually have lost a lot of money also, given that the fact that the currency was way below 50 at that time. So, but if you look at the bond market, I think it's really attractive. If you compare the spreads versus the U.S. rates opened the year at around 4.6. It's now at 4. It's breaking at 4%. It's going to break 4%. And we're still relatively flat on a year to date. So we have widened around 60 basis points. So
He finds gold an expensive investment and sees that bonds are beating equities. Aquino is particularly bullish on 10 to 20-year maturities.
it's basically managing duration. Find value in the curve. The first time we spoke, I mentioned the 5-year because at that time the spreads were pretty flat with the 5-year and the 10-year, and it steepened. So I recommended the 10-year last time, and now it actually is still steep. So we might move a little further down.
On to the markets now. Philippine shares join the rest of Asia for a second day of declines after the Trump tariff announcements. That's despite the Philippines receiving the second lowest tariffs in Southeast Asia. The main index fell 1% back below the 6,100 level to 60.84. Decliners overpowered advancers 102 to 74. Value turnover was a hefty 11.7 billion pesos. Mining and oil and services absorbed the deepest losses, with ICTSI losing 4.5%, while property listing RL Commercial REIT also took a 2.85% hit. The SEI closed last week with a 13% gain it's finished the week lower from last week. Meanwhile, at the foreign exchange market, the peso is currently trading at 56 pesos and 88 centavos to the US dollar, stronger than Thursday's close of 57.10. And that's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us again on Monday as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Always on top.
A few days before the anticipated break for Holy Week and summer, business and tourism in Baler slowly pick up. Groups of motorcycle riders took souvenir photo in the town's landmarks. This is Khaled Osmani's first time to visit the Philippines. He came from Sweden and is only staying for a few days. That's why he's trying to see as many attractions in the town as possible.
I have been around because I love swimming and try to learn surfing.
Baler Aurora is famous for surfing waves, and returning to Sabang Beach is included in Pedro Lox's bucket list. He took his family with him to experience the beach and the waves.
Uling punta ko dito 2015 pa. So nag-mark sa akin to kasi dito ako first natutong mag-surf. And alam ko yung spot na to, pang surfing talaga, pang beginner. Siyempre ako beginner. Sa ibang magagaling, astig din yung swell dito. And mababaw.
Locals lost livelihood since they've experienced a decline in their tourism industry during the pandemic. They are hopeful that this year will be a good year for business and tourism. Tourist police has already been deployed in strategic places for security and to assist their guests. Traffic rerouting will be implemented as well. Baler Tourism Office expects more guests to visit and ride their waves, which according to them is the birth of Philippine surfing. PNP warns the public to take extra caution. PNP data shows high drowning incidents during summer season. They in fact recorded 125 cases in 2023 and 90 last year. The PNP Maritime Group's task is for port security and quick response in recreational and coastal emergencies.
Sila pa yung may tasking upang palakasin po yung ating kampanya para maiwasan po yung drowning incident sa mga tourist spots na may mga paliguan po. Ang pinakamalaki po ay ang Region 1 na alam naman natin na may mga magagandang beaches, at po yung Region 4A po.
The Highway Patrol Group, meanwhile, will serve as safety marshals and reinforcements to ongoing COMELEC-initiated checkpoints. Francis Polbe, Bilyonaryo News Channel.